4 months after the broadcast, the Galactic Coalition's official investigation ship arrived at Dusthaven. It was not a military vessel, but a diplomatic one, its hull painted with the symbols of peace and justice. Anne and Regath watched it land with mixed feelings. The broadcast had changed everything, but change was not always comfortable. The lead investigator was a Synthol, a species known for their rigid sense of fairness. Her name was Leora, and she carried herself with quiet authority. She met with Anne and Ragath in Pym's office, reviewing documents on a datapad as she spoke. The Coalition has shut down 12 fighting arenas across 7 sectors, Leora said without preamble. The Hurlon Masters have been arrested and charged with multiple crimes including slavery, torture, and murder. Your testimony will be needed at their trial. What about the bounty? Anne asked, cancelled and declared illegal. Anyone who attempts to collect it now will face Coalition prosecution. Leora looked up from her pad. You are both free beings. The Coalition formally apologizes for failing to protect you from exploitation and suffering. Ragath spoke for the first time. Apologies do not undo 5 years. No, Leora agreed. They do not. But the Coalition is prepared to offer compensation and assistance. We can help you rebuild your lives. For Ragath, we can arrange transport to Ashmar if you wish to return home. The words hung in the air. Home. Ragath had dreamed of Ashmar every night in the arena, but now that the possibility was real, he felt uncertain. What if his pack had moved on? What if they did not recognize him after all these years? What if he no longer fit in the world he had been torn from? Anne seemed to sense his hesitation. Can I accompany him? To Ashmar? Leora nodded. Of course. The Coalition owes you both far more than a simple transport flight. The journey to Ashmar took 2 weeks on a Coalition vessel. It was nothing like the stolen transport or the cramped cargo hold where Anne and Ragath had hidden. The ship had proper quarters, good food, and a medical bay where doctors treated Ragath's old injuries with advanced regeneration technology. The scars on his neck faded. His leg, which had limped for years, strengthened. His body began to remember what it felt like to be whole. Anne spent the journey learning about Ashmar's culture and language. She wanted to meet Ragath's people properly, to understand the world that had shaped him. Ragath taught her the traditional greetings, the proper way to approach a pack elder. The songs his mother had sung. When Ashmar finally appeared in the viewport, Ragath pressed his face against the glass like a child. The planet was exactly as he remembered. Red mountains rising from volcanic plains, rivers of melted rock glowing in the valleys, the twin moons hanging in the sky like watchful eyes. The ship landed in a clearing near the Red Mountains where Ragath's pack had traditionally lived. Coalition representatives had contacted the pack elders in advance, explaining the situation. As the boarding ramp lowered, Ragath saw figures waiting at the edge of the clearing. His legs felt weak. After everything he had survived, this moment terrified him more than any arena fight. What if they rejected him? What if too much had changed? Anne touched his arm gently. Go, I will be right here. Ragath walked down the ramp. The figures approached, moving cautiously. One walked ahead of the others, an older female with gray-tinged scales. She stopped a few feet away, studying Ragath's face. Mother, Ragath whispered. Her eyes widened. Then with a cry that echoed off the mountains, she rushed forward and embraced him. She was smaller than he remembered, or perhaps he had grown larger. But her arms around him felt like coming back to life. She touched his face, his shoulders, his hands, as if confirming he was real. My son, she said in their language. My son has come home. The other pack members approached, more slowly. Ragath recognized his younger brother, now fully grown. His sister, who had been barely walking when he was taken, now stood tall and strong. Cousins, aunts, uncles, all pressing close to touch him and confirm that he lived. They brought him to the pack's settlement, a collection of stone dwellings built into the mountainside. That night they held a traditional welcoming feast. Anne was invited as honored guest, given a place of respect beside the pack elders. They asked her to tell the story of how she and Ragath met, and she did, leaving out none of the painful details. When she finished, Ragath's mother approached her. Through a translator, she said, You gave me back my son. There is no gift greater than this. You are welcome in our pack for as long as you live. Over the following weeks, Anne watched Ragath transform. The tension that had lived in his shoulders faded. He laughed with his siblings. He taught the pack's youngsters the old songs his mother had taught him. He ran through the mountains, his powerful legs covering ground with joy instead of fear. But Anne knew she could not stay forever. She had her own family waiting, her own home calling. One evening she told Ragath that it was time for her to return to human space. They sat on a cliff overlooking the volcanic plains, watching the twin moons rise. "I will miss you," Ragath said simply. "I will miss you too. But we are packed now, remember? Distance does not change that. Will you come back? Someday?" "Yes," Anne promised. "I will come back and meet your children. I will teach them about humans, so they grow up knowing we are friends." Ragath was silent for a moment. Then he said, "What you did in the arena when you knelt instead of fighting. That changed everything. Not just for me, but for many beings. The galaxy is different now because you chose compassion over fear." Anne smiled. "The galaxy is different because you chose not to kill me when you could have. Because you remembered that there is more to strength than violence." The coalition ship returned to take Anne home. Ragath walked with her to the landing site, his whole pack following to bid her farewell. They performed a traditional departure song, voices rising in harmony that made the mountains ring. As Anne's ship lifted off, she looked down at Ragath standing among his people, his hand raised in farewell. She touched the black scale he had given her, now worn on a chain around her neck beside her father's medallion. The war beast who had roared at all beings in rage now lived in peace, teaching his pack that the universe held wonders beyond violence. The human pilot who had been captured and enslaved now carried the story of an unlikely friendship across the stars. Months later, when Anne finally reached Earth and reunited with her family, she told them everything. The story spread among humans, becoming a legend that mothers told their children. It was the tale of how one person's choice to show mercy had broken chains, ended suffering, and proved that compassion could triumph over cruelty. And in the Red Mountains of Ashmar, Ragath told his own version of the story to the young ones of his pack. He told them about the small human who had seen past his claws and scales to the person beneath. He told them that true strength was not about dominating others, but about protecting those who could not protect themselves. The story ended with a truth that both species came to understand. The most powerful force in the galaxy was not weapons or technology or physical might. It was the simple decision to care about someone different from yourself, to see their suffering and choose to help rather than harm. Ragath and Anne's paths had crossed in a place of blood and death, but their choice to show kindness had created ripples that spread across countless worlds. Fighting arenas closed. Laws changed. Species that had feared each other began to talk. And at the center of it all was a simple truth that every being could understand. When you meet someone who roars, sometimes the bravest thing you can do is kneel and offer friendship instead of fear. 2 weeks passed in the rhythm of honest work. Ragath learned what it meant to use his strength for creation instead of destruction. He helped repair mining equipment that had broken under the stress of constant use. He carried loads that would have required 3 smaller beings. He held up support beams while workers welded them into place. At first, the colonists kept their distance, whispering when he passed. But fear faded when they saw him carefully hand a lost toy back to a child, when they watched him spend an entire afternoon helping an elderly miner fix her home's air recycler, when they noticed how he always moved slowly around the smaller beings. Conscious of his size and strength, Anne worked alongside him, repairing ships and systems with the practical knowledge she had learned on her family's cargo vessel. She taught some of the younger colonists basic maintenance skills. In the evenings, she and Ragath would sit in their small quarters in the guest dome, sharing meals and stories. One night, Ragath asked Anne to teach him more human words. He wanted to speak her language properly, not just rely on the translator. They sat cross-legged on the floor, Anne patiently correcting his pronunciation while he practiced. "Friend," Ragath said, the human word feeling strange in his mouth. "What does it mean, truly?" "A friend is someone who chooses to care about you," Anne explained. "Not because they have to, but because they want to. Someone who helps you when you need it and stays with you through difficult times." Ragath thought about this. "Are we friends?" Anne smiled. "Yes, I think we are." Something moved in Ragath's chest, a warmth he had not felt in years. That night he performed a ceremony from his culture. He found a loose scale on his shoulder, one that was ready to shed naturally, and he carefully pulled it free. In his species, offering a scale to another being was sacred. It meant they were pack now, family by choice rather than blood, He offered the black glassy scale to Anne. "This is old custom. If you take it, you are my pack. We protect each other. We do not abandon each other." Anne understood the significance. She took the scale reverently and pulled off the chain around her neck. On it hung a small metal medallion, worn smooth by years of handling. "This was my father's pilot medallion. His father gave it to him, and he gave it to me when I got my first ship. In my culture, we give precious things to people we trust completely." She placed the chain around Ragath's neck. The medallion looked tiny against his massive chest, but he touched it gently as if it were made of fragile crystal. They sat in comfortable silence, both understanding that something important had just happened. They were no longer just two beings who had escaped together. They were family. The next morning, their peace shattered. Alarms blared through the colony. Anne and Ragath ran outside to see ships descending from orbit. Not patrol vessels this time, but bounty hunter ships, heavily armed and bearing no official markings. Pym's voice crackled over the colony's communication system. "All residents take shelter. We have hostile ships incoming." The bounty hunters landed in a ring around the colony, cutting off all escape routes. Their leader, a massive being named Grull, emerged from the largest ship. He was a Braxian, twice the size of a human, with thick armor-plated skin and tusks that jutted from his lower jaw. Grull's voice boomed across the colony through amplifiers. "We know the war beast and the human are here. Surrender them now, and no one else needs to be harmed. Resist, and we will tear this colony apart until we find them." Anne and Ragath looked at each other. They could run, try to reach their ship, but they would never make it past the bounty hunters. And even if they did, these hunters had tracked them here. They would follow. Pym found them near the guest dome. The old Triloc's face was grave. "You do not have to face this alone. Many of the colonists have weapons." "We can fight." "No," Anne said immediately. "These people have families. They did not ask to be part of our problems." "Perhaps," Pym said slowly, "but they know what you did in the arena. Your story has spread across the holonet. Everyone has seen the recordings of you refusing to kill each other. Many beings are inspired by what you did." Ragath shook his head. "We will not let innocent people die for us. We will surrender." Before they could move, several colonists emerged from nearby buildings. They were armed with mining tools converted into weapons. More appeared, then more, until dozens of them stood between the bounty hunters and Anne and Ragath. A young miner stepped forward. "Pym is right. We have all seen what you did. You showed the galaxy that compassion is stronger than cruelty. We will not hand you over to be killed." Anne felt tears sting her eyes. These people, who had barely known them for 2 weeks, were willing to risk everything. But Gruul was not patient. His ship's weapons powered up, targeting the colony's life support domes. "Last chance," he called out. "Give them to me or I start destroying your air supplies." Ragath made his decision. He stepped out from behind the colonists, his hands raised. "I am here, take me. Leave the others alone." Anne grabbed his arm. "No. We face this together." They walked forward together, past the line of armed colonists, toward Gruul and his hunters. The Braxian's tusked face split into a cruel smile. "Finally. Do you know how much the Hurlons are paying for you? Enough to retire on." "The Hurlons are criminals," Anne said clearly. "They torture beings for profit. Taking us to them makes you just as guilty." "I do not care about guilt," Gruul replied. "I care about credits." He gestured to his hunters, who moved forward with restraints. But before they could reach Anne and Ragath, something happened that no one expected. Every colonist communication device activated simultaneously. A message began broadcasting, not just to the colony but across the entire sector. It was a compilation of footage from the arena, showing Ragath's years of torture, showing Anne's speech about how societies are judged, showing them escaping together, showing them working peacefully in the colony. The message ended with a simple question in dozens of languages. "Is this the galaxy we want to be?" Anne realized what had happened. During their time at the colony, she had uploaded all the footage she could find to a delayed broadcast system. She had set it to send if they were ever captured or killed. She had not mentioned it to anyone, not even Ragath, because she had not been sure it would work, but it was working. Across hundreds of worlds, billions of beings were seeing the truth. Grull's communication device buzzed. Then again, and again. He checked it and his expression changed. Messages were flooding in from his contacts across the galaxy. The public outrage was immediate and massive. The Galactic Coalition government was being forced to respond. The bounty was being investigated. Taking Anne and Ragath now would not make Gruul rich. It would make him the most hated being in civilized space. Gruul snarled in frustration, but he was a practical being. He gestured to his hunters. "We are leaving." The bounty hunter ships lifted off, leaving the colony intact. 3 days in space changed everything. The stolen ship drifted through an asteroid field. Its engines powered down to minimum to avoid detection. Inside, Anne had converted the cargo hold into a makeshift living space for both of them. It was cramped and uncomfortable, but it was theirs. Ragath sat on the metal floor, his massive body taking up most of the available space. Anne had found a medical kit in the storage lockers and was treating the wounds on his neck where the collar had been. Her small hands worked carefully, cleaning away dried blood and applying regeneration gel. "This will help the skin heal faster," Anne explained as she worked, "though the scars may never fully disappear." Ragath did not care about scars. His entire body was a map of old injuries. What amazed him was the gentleness of her touch. She could have been rough and hurried, but instead she moved slowly and carefully, as if his comfort mattered. No one had touched him with care since his mother. "Why did you do it?" Ragath asked suddenly. "In the arena. You could have fought. You could have run. Why did you kneel?" Anne paused in her work. She had been thinking about this question herself. "I saw the recordings of your fights. They showed them to prisoners in the holding cells, I think to scare us, but I did not see a monster in those recordings. I saw someone who was suffering. Someone who fought because he had no choice." She resumed applying the gel. "My grandmother told me a story when I was young. She said that on Earth long ago, humans used to capture wild animals and force them to fight for entertainment. They called it sport. But eventually humans realized it was wrong. We learned that causing suffering for fun makes us less than what we could be." Ragath listened, processing her words. "Your species stopped the fighting." "Most places, yes. It took time and many arguments, but we decided that true strength is not about dominating others. It is about protecting them." Anne finished with the gel and sat back. "When I saw you in that arena, I thought about those old stories. And I thought about what kind of person I wanted to be." Over the next hours they talked. Ragath told Anne about Ashmar, his homeworld. He described the red mountains that rose like teeth toward the sky, the hot springs that his pack bathed in during the cold season, the singing stones that made music when the wind blew through them. His voice grew soft when he spoke of his mother, who had taught him the old songs, and his younger siblings who he would never see again. Anne shared her own memories. She told him about Earth's blue oceans, so different from Ashmar's volcanic landscape. She described her family's cargo ship, which had been her home for most of her childhood. Her father had taught her to fly before she could properly read. Her mother had taught her to repair engines with whatever materials were available. "They must be worried," Anne said quietly. "When the pirates took me, I was on a routine cargo run. My ship never arrived at its destination. My parents probably think I am dead." Ragath reached out and gently touched Anne's shoulder with one clawed finger. The gesture was awkward but sincere. "We will find a way to send them a message, to let them know you live." The ship's computer suddenly beeped an alert. Anne jumped up and ran to the cockpit. Ragath squeezed in behind her as much as he could, peering over her shoulder at the displays. "Patrol ships," Anne said, her voice tight. "3 of them. They are scanning this sector." "Are they looking for us?" Ragath asked. "Probably. The Hurlons put a bounty on both of us." Anne checked the scanners. "The patrol ships have not detected us yet, but if they come closer, our heat signature will show up on their sensors." "Can we run?" "Not without them seeing us. Our ship is too slow to outrun military vessels." Anne thought quickly. "But there is a mining colony on the other side of this asteroid field. Dust Haven. If we can reach it before the patrols spot us, we can hide among the other ships there." It was risky. They would have to navigate through the asteroids using minimal thrust to avoid detection, then dock at a colony where someone might recognize them from the bounty notices. But staying in the asteroid field meant being caught eventually. Anne made the decision. Her hands moved over the controls, plotting a careful course through the tumbling rocks. The ship moved forward slowly, almost drifting, using the asteroids as cover. Behind them, the patrol ships continued their search pattern, growing closer with each minute. A particularly large asteroid blocked their path. Anne adjusted course, bringing them within meters of its surface. In the cargo hold, loose items rattled as the ship's artificial gravity struggled with the proximity to the asteroid's mass. Through the cockpit window, they could see the pitted surface of the rock sliding past, close enough to touch. The patrol ships passed overhead, their powerful scanners sweeping the area. Anne held her breath. One of them paused as if it had detected something. For 10 endless seconds, the patrol ship hovered while Ragath and Anne waited. Then it moved on, continuing its search pattern in a different direction. When the patrol ships were finally out of range, Anne let out a long breath. That was close. They cleared the asteroid field and approached Dust Haven. The colony was small, just a collection of pressurized domes built into the surface of a large asteroid. Mining equipment dotted the landscape, and several small ships were docked at the landing pads. It looked run down and forgotten, exactly the kind of place that might not ask too many questions. Anne brought the ship in for landing on an empty pad at the edge of the colony. As the engines powered down, she turned to Ragath. "We need supplies. Food, medical supplies, fuel. But we have no money. Everything I had was taken when the pirates captured me." "I have nothing," Ragath admitted. In the arena, he had owned nothing. Even his body had not been his own. Anne thought for a moment. "Then we will have to trade work for supplies. I can repair ships. You are strong enough to help with heavy mining equipment. Maybe the colony needs workers." They exited the ship carefully. The asteroid's low gravity made movement strange. Ragath had to adjust his steps to avoid launching himself into the air. They made their way toward the colony's main dome, where a faded sign indicated the administrative office. As they approached, several miners stopped their work to stare. Most backed away slowly when they saw Ragath. One dropped his tools and ran. Anne felt Ragath tense beside her, and she placed a hand on his arm. "They are just afraid. Give them time." Inside the main dome, they found the administrative office. An elderly alien sat behind a desk covered in papers and broken equipment. He was a Trilok with 4 arms and wrinkled gray skin. When he saw Ragath, his eyes widened, but he did not run. "Well," the old Trilok said slowly, "we do not get many war beasts here. Or humans, for that matter. I am Pym. I run this colony, such as it is." Anne stepped forward. "We need supplies and a place to stay for a few days. We can work to pay for them. I am a trained pilot and mechanic. My friend here is very strong." Pym looked them over carefully. His old eyes seemed to see more than just their appearances. "You two are running from something. Or someone. There was no point in lying." "Yes," Anne admitted. Pym was silent for a long moment. Then he sighed. "This colony is full of people running from something. That is why most of us are here. As long as you do not bring violence to my people, I do not care what you are running from." He gestured at the broken equipment on his desk. "Can you fix this communicator?" "It has been dead for 2 weeks." Anne picked up the device and examined it. A few minutes with basic tools, and she had it working again. Pym's face split into a smile. "You can stay," he decided. "We will find work for both of you." The service tunnels smelled of old metal and cleaning chemicals. Emergency lights cast everything in harsh shadows as Ragath ran through passages he had walked in chains 1,000 times. Behind them, the sounds of pursuit echoed off the walls. Shouting voices, heavy footsteps, the whine of charging weapons. Anne clung to Ragath's back, her fingers wrapped around his scales. Every few seconds his body would spasm as the collar sent fresh shocks through his system. She could feel the tremors and knew he was running on pure determination. The pain must be unbearable, but he kept moving. They rounded a corner and nearly collided with a maintenance bot. The small hovering machine beeped an alarm and zipped away. Anne's mind raced. She had been a cargo pilot before her capture. She knew ships, systems, basic engineering. The collar was killing Ragath slowly. They had to remove it. "Stop," Anne commanded. Just for a moment, Ragath skidded to a halt, his claws scraping the metal floor. His chest heaved with exhaustion. Anne slid off his back and examined the collar in the dim emergency lighting. It was a sophisticated piece of technology, seamlessly fitted around his thick neck. No obvious latches or weak points. Trying to pry it off would trigger its defenses. "I cannot remove it normally," Anne said, thinking aloud. "But every electronic device has a weakness. Heat makes circuits expand. Cold makes them brittle." She looked around the tunnel. Pipes ran along the ceiling and walls, carrying various substances throughout the complex. Her eyes locked onto a blue pipe marked with warning symbols. "Coolant line. The liquid inside would be cold enough to freeze organic tissue instantly." "This will hurt," Anne warned. "But the collar will hurt worse if we leave it on." Ragath understood. He had lived with pain for 5 years. What was a little more if it meant freedom? He nodded. Anne climbed onto a support beam and used a piece of broken metal from the floor to puncture the coolant pipe. Blue liquid sprayed out with tremendous pressure. She angled the stream toward Ragath's collar, and when it hit the metal, frost formed immediately. Ragath roared. The super-cooled liquid splashed onto his scales and skin where the collar met his neck. It felt like being burned and frozen at the same time. His instinct screamed at him to move away, but he forced himself to hold still. Anne was helping him. He trusted her. The collar's metal turned white with frost. Ice crystals formed along its surface. Anne jumped down and grabbed Ragath's arm. "Now! Break it now before it warms up." Ragath reached up with both hands and gripped the collar. His massive strength, the strength that had killed so many opponents in the arena, now worked against his chains instead of for them. He pulled, muscles bulged. The frozen metal resisted, then began to crack. One section snapped. Then another. The collar's electronics sparked and died. With a final heave, Ragath tore the collar apart. Pieces of it fell to the floor, trailing wisps of frost. The skin underneath was raw and bleeding, showing the permanent scars where the device had rested for years. But the collar was gone. For the first time in 5 years, Ragath's neck was free. He touched the bare skin, almost unable to believe it. No more shocks, no more constant threat of pain. He looked at Anne with something like wonder in his red eyes. "Thank you," he said in his rumbling voice. "We are not safe yet," Anne replied, though she smiled. "We need to find a ship." The sounds of pursuit were getting closer. Security forces were converging on their location. Ragath's sense of direction in the complex was perfect from years of being moved through it. He knew they were near the lower hangar level where supply ships docked. They ran again, but this time Ragath moved differently. Without the collar's constant pain and threat, his body remembered how to run properly. His limp disappeared. His movements became fluid and powerful. He was still injured and exhausted, but he was no longer crippled by torture. They burst through a service door into the hangar bay. It was a vast space filled with ships of various sizes. Cargo haulers, personal transports, refueling drones. The bay was mostly empty of people since the arena fights were still ongoing. But a few maintenance workers stood near a refueling station. When they saw Ragath, they screamed and ran for the emergency exits, and felt a pang of guilt. These workers had done nothing wrong, and now they were terrified. But there was no time for explanations. Anne ran toward a small transport ship. It was a civilian model, used for short-range flights between stations and nearby planets. She had flown similar ships dozens of times. The boarding ramp was down, and she sprinted up it with Ragath close behind. The interior was cramped. Ragath barely fit through the door, and once inside he had to crouch in the cargo area. There was no way his massive frame could squeeze into the cockpit. Anne left him in the back and dove into the pilot's seat. No keys. Of course there were no keys. She pulled open the panel under the control console and stared at the tangle of wires inside. Hot wiring a ship was illegal and dangerous. Cross the wrong wires and you could fry the entire electrical system or trigger the self-destruct. But Anne had grown up on cargo ships that were held together with spare parts and prayers. Her father had taught her that any system could be bypassed if you understood its logic. She traced the power flow with her eyes, identified the ignition circuit, and carefully connected 2 specific wires. The ship hummed to life. Lights flickered on across the control panels. Anne's hands flew over the controls, running through the pre-flight sequence at triple speed. Behind her, she heard shouting. Security forces had reached the hangar. "Hold on," Anne called back to Ragath. She slammed the throttle forward. The ship lurched off the deck without retracting the boarding ramp, which tore free and clattered across the hangar floor. Warning alarms blared about the open door, but Anne ignored them. She aimed the ship at the hangar's atmospheric shield and punched through it. Space opened up before them. The planet Crimson Gate fell away behind them, growing smaller by the second. Anne adjusted their course away from the main traffic lanes, hoping to disappear into the vastness of space before pursuit could organize. In the cargo hold, Ragath sat with his back against the wall. He could see stars through the cockpit window. Real stars, not the artificial lights of the arena. He had forgotten how beautiful they were. His hand touched his bare neck again, still hardly believing the collar was gone. From the pilot's seat, Anne called back, "Are you all right?" Ragath thought about the question. 5 years ago, hunters had destroyed his life. Today, a human he had just met had given it back. He was wounded and exhausted. They were being hunted by every bounty hunter in 3 sectors. He had no idea what would happen next, but for the first time in 5 years he felt something other than pain and rage. "Yes," Ragath answered. "I am all right." Pain exploded through Ragath's body like lightning striking water. The collar around his neck burned with electrical current, sending waves of agony down his spine. He roared, not in rage but in suffering, and his massive form shook. Still, he did not move to attack Anne. He kept his hand extended even as every muscle screamed at him to make the pain stop. Anne scrambled to her feet and moved closer instead of running away. She placed both hands on his arm, as if her tiny grip could somehow anchor him through the torture. "I am here," she said firmly. "You are not alone." Above them, on the control platform, Bixel slammed his segmented limbs against the console. His compound eyes reflected fury as he watched his prize war beast refuse to fight. Around him, other Herlon masters chittered in their clicking language, gesturing wildly at the screen showing the frozen arena. "Increase the voltage," Bixel commanded. "Make him obey." The pain doubled. Ragath's vision went white. His claws dug furrows in the dirt as his body convulsed. But through the agony, he felt Anne's hands on his arm, steady and warm. He focused on that feeling. Someone was touching him with kindness. Someone cared if he hurt. In the stands, the chaos was spreading. What had started as confused murmuring had grown into full arguments. Some aliens were on their feet, shouting at the arena masters. Others were demanding refunds. A few were recording everything on their personal devices, broadcasting the scene across the galactic network. "This is wrong," a Daltharan merchant called out, his blue skin flushed with anger. The beast submitted. "The fight is over by traditional combat law. The human used illegal technology." Bixel's voice boomed over the speakers. "She has somehow controlled the war beast's mind. This is cheating." "I see no technology," another voice shouted back. "I see only a beast who has finally had enough of your cruelty." The argument spread like fire through dry grass. The Herlon masters realized they were losing control of the situation. Worse, they were losing profit. Angry customers were already leaving, and the holonet was exploding with commentary about the frozen fight. Bixel made a decision. If the war beast would not fight, both creatures would die. At least that would give the crowd a finale and restore the arena's reputation for delivering blood. "Security drones," Bixel announced. "Execute both subjects. Technical malfunction. Full refunds to all attendees." 20 armed drones dropped from hatches in the ceiling. They were sleek killing machines, programmed to eliminate targets without hesitation. Their weapons hummed as they charged, red targeting lights painting dots on both Ragath and Anne. Anne saw the drones descending and knew they had seconds to live. She looked up at Ragath, whose eyes were squeezed shut against the collar's pain. She made a choice that surprised even herself. If she was going to die, she would die speaking truth. "Listen to me," Anne shouted, her voice carrying through her translator to every speaker in the arena. "Look at him. Really look. That is not a monster. That is a person who has been tortured every day for years. The Herlons bought him as a child after hunters killed his family. They have beaten him, starved him, and forced him to kill for your entertainment." The drones were 10 meters away, weapons locked on target. "My species has a belief," Anne continued, her voice growing stronger. "We believe that how a society treats its prisoners, its slaves, its weakest members tells you everything about that society's soul. So I ask you, all of you watching, what does this say about the Galactic Coalition?" 8 meters. "I am going to die now," Anne said. "And so is Ragath. But before I do, I want every one of you to know that we could have been friends. Humans and his people could have built something beautiful together. Instead, you turned him into a weapon and me into a victim. You did this, remember that." 6 meters. Something strange happened. One of the drones suddenly exploded in midair, destroyed by weapons fire from the stands. Then another. And another. Several aliens in the audience had pulled out personal defense weapons and were shooting at the drones. "Protect them," someone yelled. "This is murder, not sport," another voice joined in. The arena erupted into complete pandemonium. Security forces tried to restore order, but they were overwhelmed. The Hurlon Master screamed commands that no one followed. In the chaos, no one was watching the arena floor anymore. Anne saw their chance. She leaned close to Ragath's head and spoke directly into his ear. "Can you move? We need to run now." Ragath opened his eyes. The pain was still there, the collar still burning, but through it all he saw Anne's face. She had not abandoned him. Even facing death, she had defended him to the crowd. Something broke inside him, something that had been frozen for 5 years. "I can move," he rasped. "Then run," Anne said. "If we are going to die, let it be while trying to escape, not kneeling in the dirt." Ragath rose to his feet, his massive legs trembling but holding. Anne grabbed onto his arm and pulled herself onto his back, gripping his scales. Every movement sent fresh pain through Ragath's body from the collar, but he forced himself forward. The viewing barrier was reinforced glass, designed to stop anything in the arena from reaching the crowd. Ragath charged at it anyway. His shoulder hit the barrier with the force of a meteor strike. The glass held for 1 second, then 2, then shattered into 1,000,000 pieces. Alarms shrieked through the complex. Red emergency lights bathed everything in bloody illumination. Ragath crashed through into the spectator area, scattering aliens in every direction. Behind them, security forces were mobilizing, but the crowd's chaos slowed their response. Ragath ran toward the exit tunnels, his feet pounding the metal floors. Anne held tight to his back, her mind racing. They had escaped the arena floor, but they were still deep inside the complex. They needed a plan. "The maintenance corridors," Anne shouted over the alarm noise. "You must know them. They had to move you through the complex somehow." Ragath did know them. Every path from his pit to the arena was burned into his memory. He changed direction, heading for a service entrance. His size was an advantage here. The corridors were built to accommodate large war beasts, which meant he could move at full speed while security forces had to navigate in single file. They plunged into the maze of passages beneath the arena, leaving chaos and confusion behind them. The screams of the crowd shook the metal walls like thunder. Dust fell from the ceiling beams as thousands of alien voices roared for blood. In the darkness beneath the arena floor, Ragath pressed his massive body against the cold stone wall and waited. His scales, black as volcanic glass, scraped against the rough surface. The chains around his wrists were thick enough to anchor a starship, but he barely noticed their weight anymore. 5 years. 5 years since the hunters had killed his mother and dragged him from the red mountains of Ashmar. 5 years since he had seen the twin moons rise over his home. Now the only sky he knew was the metal roof of this pit, and the only sound was the hungry crowd above. The floor beneath him trembled. The gate was rising. Ragath stood slowly, his 12-foot frame unfolding in the darkness. His red eyes glowed like embers in the shadows. The collar around his neck hummed with electricity, ready to punish any hesitation. The arena masters had trained him well. Hesitate and feel pain. Refuse and feel agony. Kill and receive food. Light flooded the tunnel as the gate opened completely. The noise hit him like a physical force. Ragath walked forward, his clawed feet leaving deep marks in the dirt floor. He emerged into the circular arena, and the crowd's screams grew louder. They always did when they saw him. He was their favorite monster. The arena was huge, carved from redstone and fitted with energy barriers to protect the spectators. Seats rose up in circles, filled with aliens from 100 different worlds. Some had fur, some had scales. Some had bodies made of crystal or metal. All of them had come to watch creatures die. Across the arena, the opposite gate began to open. Ragath dropped into a fighting stance, claws extended. He had faced everything in this pit. Warriors in powered armor, beasts with acid blood, machines that shot fire and lightning. He had killed them all. The arena masters always found new opponents, and Ragath always survived. But when the opposite gate opened fully, confusion rippled through the crowd. The noise changed from excited roars to puzzled murmurs. Ragath stared at what emerged from the tunnel and felt equally confused. A human walked into the arena. A female, small and thin, wearing torn brown clothing. She had no armor, no weapons, no cybernetic enhancements, Just pale skin, dark hair pulled back, and eyes that looked too calm for someone about to die. Ragath had heard of humans, the new species that had recently joined the Galactic Coalition. Fragile things from a world called Earth, physically weak compared to most spacefaring races. What was one doing here? Above the arena, a voice boomed from the speakers. It belonged to Bixel, one of the Hurlon arena masters. His insect-like face appeared on the massive screens around the arena. Honored guests, today we offer something special. A human has challenged our undefeated champion. Let us see if these newcomers are as clever as they claim. Laughter rippled through the crowd. Several aliens made gestures that clearly meant they thought this was a joke. Ragath understood their reaction. This human looked like she would break if he touched her. The human, Anne was her designation according to the screen, walked to the center of the arena. She looked up at Ragath without fear. That was strange. Everyone feared him. Fear was the natural response to a war beast. The starting horn blared. The fight had begun. Ragath charged forward, his massive legs covering the distance in seconds. He would make this quick. There was no honor in crushing something so fragile, but the collar would shock him if he refused. Better to end it fast and spare her suffering. But 3 steps from Anne, something impossible happened. She dropped to her knees. Her head bowed forward, exposing the back of her neck. Her hands spread wide, palms up and empty. Ragath's charge stopped as if he had hit a wall. His claws were raised to strike, but his arm would not move. He stared down at the kneeling human, and something deep in his mind stirred. Something old. Something from before the chains and the blood and the screaming crowds. This was the submission pose. This was how his people asked for mercy. How did this human know? The crowd fell silent. Thousands of aliens held their breath, waiting to see what the war beast would do. Ragath stood frozen, his massive chest heaving. The collar around his neck began to hum. A warning. The arena masters wanted him to kill her now. Anne lifted her head slowly. When she looked up at Ragath, her eyes were not filled with terror. They were filled with sadness. She spoke, and the translator device in her ear carried her words in his language. You are tired. I can see it in how you move. The scars on your arms never heal because they keep cutting you. Your left leg hurts when you walk. I have watched you from the holding cells. I have seen how they treat you. Ragath's breath caught. No one had spoken to him with kindness in 5 years. No one had noticed his pain. No one had cared. I am tired too, Anne continued. Her voice was soft but steady. I was a pilot. I flew cargo ships between colonies. Pirates captured me 3 months ago and sold me to the arena. I know what it is like to be caged. I know what it is like to be hurt for someone else's profit. The collar's hum grew louder. Pain began to pulse through Ragath's neck. The arena masters were getting impatient. Kill her, the collar demanded. Tear her apart. Give the crowd what they want. But Ragath found himself doing something he had not done in 5 years. He lowered his claws. He stepped back, and then slowly he sat down on the arena floor. His massive body settled into the dust with a heavy thud that echoed through the silent stadium. He extended one enormous hand toward Anne, palm up, claws retracted. It was the peace gesture of his people, a promise not to harm. Anne's eyes filled with tears. She reached out and placed her small hand on his palm. Her fingers could not even wrap around one of his claws, but the touch felt warm. The crowd erupted into chaos.